So, good evening, everyone, or morning, as the case may be in Australia and other wheres. This is Michael Watson. I am the host of the virtual chapter. I'm here with my co-host, Karen. Say hello, Karen.
Hello, Karen. And everybody tonight, and those of you on the recording.
The always charming Karen Hand. And we are bringing you the virtual chapter meeting for September 2025. Time just keeps zipping on into the future, as somebody in the rock music once said. So it's great to have you. Great to be here tonight. We've got a special speaker that we're really looking forward to, and a couple of other things to share with you. Before we get started, we might want to talk about the calendar just for a minute, particularly because this very weekend, that is just 3 days, I guess, from now, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days from now, Saturday and Sunday is the Galaxy of the Stars, the twice a year event that we do at IMDHA. For those of you who don't know about it, we have four speakers. Each of them has a half a day. So it's a longer presentation than you usually get, from like 1 hour talks. And the speakers are so very carefully selected, and they've got some great stuff. The general theme for this galaxy is constellations of change, and our speakers are Will Wood, Sheila Zach, Linda Bennett, and Lori Hammond. And they've got some fantastic stuff. So it really is going to be a special one. It's $139 for the weekend if you had signed up before the 1st of September. I hate to make you feel bad after the fact. It would have only been $109. So uh, you'll remember next time, of course, which will be February, and be sure and sign up early. So then the next thing I think on the calendar, I have something. I have the Certified Master Trainer training for IACT and IMDHA is online. It is October 15th through the 19th with yours truly. And it's a great 5 days, lots of fun, wonderful people. There's just so cool who we have in our community that, steps up to do things like this. So I always have a great time, and I hope that if any of you are considering becoming a trainer and certifying folks in hypnosis, that you might consider this option. And if so, contact IACT IMDHA and get yourself signed up somewhere before the 15th of October, and we'll be all ready to go. Now, about that same weekend, overlapping with me, you've got some stuff going on up there in Chicagoland. Karen, want to tell us about that?
Yeah, Hypnosis World Mid-America. And it's always the third weekend in October. It will be this year again. And it is in a suburb of Chicago, north of the city called Arlington Heights, but we still call it the Chicago Conference. Um, and Richard Bandler is the keynote speaker. Chase Hughes will also be a keynote speaker, and they'll be doing post-conference workshops. It'll be a full day workshop with Bandler in case you ever have had the desire to be up close and personal with Richard Bandler. He'll be there teaching for a full day, and it's not going to be Bandler and then he'll step off and his folks will come in and do some of the teaching. He has promised, so we've heard, he has promised to do the entire day, to teach the entire day. So that's kind of impressive. And even if you don't want to pay for Bandler the day after, he's going to be the keynote speaker, and that's pretty impressive too. So that's good for Mid America. I think Rich Guzzi, who runs Mid America now, is going to do great things for the conference. At least I'm hoping so because I want to keep it. It's in my backyard. I like it here. I've got a couple of other things going on coming up. September 23rd through 25th, I'll be on Zoylita Grant's Unleash Your Brilliance Summit. And it's going to be a pretty cool thing. It's free, it's a summit, and there will be lots of people talking about how to unleash your brilliance. And if you want information on that, I actually don't have it to put in the chat, but I can find it. You can Google Zoylita Grant and you'll be able to find that kind of thing. And she probably has it on the IMDHA forum as well, I'm guessing. I don't know. And then Mid America. And then, Michael, are you doing the Hypnosis Education Association virtual conference?
I'm not.
Oh, I am. That's coming up in November.
Yeah,
And apparently, I'm more into um, Florida or Disney than you are. I've got a Walt Disney shirt on tonight.
excellent.
I'm doing the Hypnosis Education Association virtual summit. Come on. And that's actually located in Florida. Not that they only take Floridians, but it is an
I,
offshoot.
I don't
Really.
have the t-shirt, but I live with Goofy.
I'll tell Michael you said, and he might say the same. But those are the things I have coming up. The year is rounding out. I thought that at one point that Mid-America would be all that was left, and then a bunch more opportunities came up. So it's always nice to have the opportunities available. And then the new year is already starting to fill up. IACT in May. We've got ICBCH virtual conference in February. Lots of stuff going on. I rounded up my calendar. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, yeah. How exciting. Well, then, I have something I want to talk about tonight. If before we switch over to Tracy, did they warn you, Tracy, that we were going to talk before you? Are you
Yeah.
okay? Good. I'm so glad.
And she
Every
came
once in a while, I
early.
think we have a
She
speaker
came
who's
early.
like, "Are they going to let me do my thing?" And we will certainly let you do your thing. We're looking forward to that. I just had something I wanted to share, and I'd be interested in hearing, how you all respond and what you think about it. Um, we're all in kind of the same game. That is the game of personal change, personal growth, personal development, however it is that you describe what it is that you do. Transformational technology. I like that. That's pretty good. But whatever it is, and so I thought that you might find, I hope that you'll find this as interesting as I did. A few weeks ago, I was just sitting here at home and I was thinking about some changes that I wanted to make in my yard, in my backyard. Some enhancements to the swimming pool. We've got some stuff that we want to do out there, and some gardening changes and a few other things. And so, like anybody in 2025, I was going to say 2022, which means I'm slipping. But like anybody in 2025, I went online, because that's what you do, to get some ideas and to check out some various products. And my browsing while I was doing that, got interrupted by a phone call from a good friend of mine, who was recently retired and who had not so long ago sold his house here in Florida at a great profit and moved into this lovely condominium complex. And he commented that now he doesn't have to deal with any of those household issues because I was telling him about the gardening and and the art stuff because they don't have to deal with any of those things. There's no lawn to mow. The pool boy comes and takes care of the pool, and the gardener does the landscaping, and there's a maintenance staff for everything else. He said he told me that it was very affordable and that the real estate market was great right now here. Well, when I returned to the internet, I looked at Home Depot for some yard tools and some supplies, and then to the pool store to see what I might need for my next project on the pool. But I couldn't stop thinking about what my friend had suggested. I watched some YouTubes for some landscape tips, and I got some interesting ideas. But still, I kept thinking about this. God, moving into a condominium and and what would that be like? I am nearly retired now and I've been in my house for 30 years. And even though it's gotten more challenging for me, I can't really move, can I? This is what I'm thinking. But just for the heck of it, I browsed over to the website for the condos and I also looked at a few other real estate listings, just, out of curiosity. Well, it's interesting to me to notice how sometimes, you all had this experience where you get a song stuck in your head, and it just keeps playing over and over and over again, or even an idea, something that you're thinking about or something that occupies your attention that just keeps coming back over and over and over again. And it was like that when I went to bed, and it continued this idea about moving. What would that be like? Something in the front, sometimes in the front of my mind, and occasionally slipping off into the back of my mind. And I kept wondering what it would be like to change my lifestyle, like my friend had done. So the next morning, I got up, and it started out like most days until I picked up my phone. And I combed through my email and text messages, and there were several ads for gardening supplies and for lawn furniture and for swimming pool toys, as well as a dozen real estate agents wanting to know if I'm interested in selling my house and promotions from several communities of retirees. Now that's really an interesting thing to me. Even though I'm not the first person to recognize this, I'm sure you've all experienced it. It's remarkable and even a bit spooky when it really gets cranking. It can be an annoying disruption, or it can be a helpful guide if it leads you in the right direction. But once you put something out there, once you click on a link somewhere, or visit a website, or whatever it is. In fact, today we were just having a conversation here, and then I picked up my phone. I swear to God, this is true. I picked up my phone a little later and got an interesting email about the very topic that we'd been talking about. I'm like, no, that's really kind of weird. So this idea of algorithms and how it is that they're built, you make some choice because, by the way, the thing you need to notice about the algorithm, and you really have to remember, is it's initiated by the end user. It begins when you choose to click on a link, or when you choose to go to a website, or you choose to entertain somehow digitally some particular topic. And then the machinery kicks in and starts giving you more and more of it. Whatever you put out there, it seems that you get more and more of it back. Does this, I hope some people are nodding, and that you have this experience as well, because it seems to be what's happening as the world of artificial intelligence. Boy, I remember when intelligence wasn't artificial. I kind of miss that. But yeah, that seems to be going on. And I thought, I wonder if there is some way that we could harness this metaphor for use in our work and in our change work, and what it is that we do with clients. What you click on comes back to you. And the more often you click on it, the more often it comes back, tenfold, right? This seems to be it. The world that we live in, by the way, is, if you just kind of look around your world or watch the evening news or anything, just participate in the world in any way. If you have an eye for it, what you'll notice is the world is full of clickable links, mentally clickable links. That is, things that you can invest yourself in. You can go, oh, I'm interested in that. And when you say to yourself, I'm interested in that, this is an NLP principle that some of you are probably aware of, and certainly it's a hypnosis one as well. But if you say to yourself, I'm interested in that, or ask a question inside of your head for that matter, what you do is you send your unconscious mind on a transderivational search. Literally, asking a question invites your unconscious mind to go out and to seek the answer to that question. And if you leave it alone, which, see, the problem is we just don't know how to leave it alone. If you leave it alone, it may actually bring you back the answer. Oh, we all have those experiences, don't we, where you're trying to remember something, or the name of somebody, or something, and you sort of put the question out and you just can't figure out the answer to it until you stop thinking about it. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could deliberately do what it takes to have the stuff that starts coming back to me be more and more of the things that I want to see in the world, making choices about what links to click on, what news stories, for instance, to not pay attention to, because, to invest yourself in them is only to invite more of that experience. I, uh, there's a guy, some of you know, well, some of you know anybody here from the Church of Bob, you all know Robert Anton Wilson. Some of you may. Robert Anton Wilson is the guy who he wrote the Illuminati trilogy. He was a freelance columnist and writer. He wrote a lot of articles for Playboy magazine, just the articles. He didn't write any of the pictures. And an interesting fella. And he has a couple of books. One of them is called Quantum Psychology, and one of them is called Prometheus Rising. And these are great books. And at the end of each chapter, there's a series of exercises for that a book group might. There's Karen's got the book there. That a book group might do these exercises together. So in Prometheus Rising, the first exercise is looking for a quarter. In some ways, I think, the metaphor, I don't necessarily care whether it's a quarter or what it is, because it can be anything that you want, right? But the exercise is looking for a quarter. And the idea is to take a moment to just close your eyes and mentally see yourself finding a quarter and reaching down and picking it up. and visualize that a few times, okay? And then he suggests that you go for a walk, and whenever you walk, whenever you're walking through the world, that you actually look for quarters. And so people do that, and some people find them and some people don't. And then the next part of the discussion suggests that there's one or two possible explanations if you found a bunch of quarters. One of them is that the world is just full of quarters, that there are quarters everywhere. But because you've deliberately chosen to be conscious of them, your attention seeks them out and finds them because, they actually are everywhere and you just hadn't noticed before. The other one is that somehow or another, because you are looking for quarters, you are manifesting them, yourself. Either of those responses is an interesting and possible interpretation. But the interesting thing about the first one, that is that the world is full of quarters, and you only begin to see them when you put your attention there. When you intend to, when you deliberately, I like the word deliberation, by the way. It has too many good interpretations. But when you deliberately put yourself out there going, I'm going to look for quarters, you start to find them. What would that do to your life if what you started doing was, first of all, like I said, choosing a whole lot of things not to click on, not to look for. I think there are a lot of, and in this polarized country that we live in right now, I know that I've spent more than my fair share of looking for things to make me angry. Of deciding, God, the world sucks so bad, and I can get you one more example and another example and another example and another example, and there's a rabbit hole that I can go down, right? Mother Teresa was asked one time if she was interested, if she would join some people for an anti-war rally. I think it was maybe during Vietnam. I don't know, but for an anti-war rally, and she said no. She said no, thank you. She says, but if you ever want to have a peace rally, let me know, and I'll be happy to come. I think it's really interesting that we have this opportunity, if we're going to be clicking on links, to start clicking on ones that affirm the things that we really want to generate, that we really want to manifest in the world that we live in, rather than the futile attempt that it seems to have been for the last couple of years to look at the things that we hate, hoping that by looking at them, they will somehow change. But to bring more joy into the world, to bring more beauty into the world, to bring more happiness in the world. One of the things that's curious about happiness is that the reason that people don't seem to be able to find it is that most people are looking for it in the future. Well, that's an interesting idea. A better idea might be to look for it here, look for it where you are. An even better idea is you don't need to look for it. You need to start experiencing it because it's already there. The effort doesn't need to be taken. I wonder if you realize, I have a client who's a medical doctor, for instance, and this was really an important sort of shift for him, is to recognize that, gosh, in his profession, particularly in his profession, by the way, he's a woman's doctor. So in his profession, he witnesses miracles every day, right? And until his attention came to the fact that he was living amongst the miraculous, it didn't really sort of have that same meaning for him. What a wonderful thing. Some of you may be familiar with Abraham, with the teachings of Abraham, and I'm not, but I'm going to talk about it anyway for a moment. The one thing that I remember is I heard a quotation from Abraham that says, when you're really stuck, the question to ask yourself, just looking at the world around you, is what is it that is especially wonderful about this moment? What an interesting idea. Because, by the way, there's always an answer to that question, but only if you ask the question. Now, by the way, one of the most challenging people I've ever known in my life was my grandmother. I tell people this all the time, so everybody knows. but she had a virtual question. She went through the world literally asking herself, moment by moment by moment, what is wrong with this? Whatever it was, what is wrong with this? And oh, by the way, when she wanted to have even more fun, what is wrong with this and whose fault is it? And and think about it, what that generated for her. A miserable life with all kinds of irresponsible, no good, troublemaking, problem causing people who didn't want anything to do with her, by the way. You know, how sad. Whereas if instead we just reversed her question and asked ourselves, what is magnificent about this? What is happening right now, right here, electronically, and all of us are gathered together? What is happening that isn't miraculous, for goodness sake? So to begin to look for the miraculous uh, makes it available to you. And wouldn't it be nice if what comes back to you comes back 5 times what you put out there? I wrote this down and I thought it was so funny because of the ambiguity of it, but it seems to me that what you look at is what you see. Pretty simple. Now, I don't want, by the way, I don't want to be irresponsible and suggest to people that there aren't problems in the world that need to be attended to. But when you're attending to them, if you're attending to them from this place of it is a miraculous world where change and wonderful things are possible, it will allow you to take care of the business that needs to be responsibly taken care of, and at the same time to manifest something more beautiful in the world. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I just might ask you to think about what technique or what do you got that you can use to literally click the link at the right time that you need to. We all know little techniques, things like a swish pattern or something like that, quantum focusing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've learned a million little anchoring techniques, whatever it is, but some way to remind yourself it's time for me now to step back into that mode where I'm open to experiencing and receiving, expecting the miracle and enjoying it. So there we go. That's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you, Michael.
You bet.
I love practicing that on purpose, especially around the holidays, as a matter of fact, because I think I found for me the secret to finding a parking spot in a crowded shopping mall is to go looking for the open parking spot right up front.
Mhm. Oh,
If
real
you
quick,
go looking for, what?
if I can slip this in because it's exactly that.
Yeah.
I know I've mentioned it before, and it'll only take a moment. But Richard or John Grinder rather introduced us to a woman. Some of you might have heard me talk about this before, who can find a 4-leaf clover whenever she wants to. And we didn't believe her because as we didn't know that miracles were everywhere yet. And what she did was she went out and she literally picked up a clover. And so, NLP, right? We want to figure out what's the strategy. How does she do this? And she said, what I do is I make a template, an invisible, transparent mental template of a 4-leaf clover, and what I do is I go out and I find a bed of clover, and I literally take the template and I just comb it back and forth across that bed of clover. And at some point it just fits. I said, what? She says, yeah, it just finds the clover. And I just reach down and I pick it up. And we saw her do it like a few times. It was an amazing thing. So there's the parking place as well.
Yeah.
Look for the parking place. People drive in the parking lot and go, oh,
Look for
God,
the
there's no.
available spot or look for the open spot. That's the important part of that equation. Look for the open parking spot. When you go look for the spot that's open or opening even, you'll start noticing taillights the moment they come on. And oh, you can slow down and let them, you miss that stuff if you're not looking for it.
Yeah.
How many times have you noticed is just past the spot that somebody pulled out of? Oh
Yeah.
man, if I'd have just waited. Right.
And for those of us that don't like to hike, especially on Wednesdays, it really is nice to be able to get a parking spot that's closer to the front door.
But for those of us who do want to move forward, because it's still Tuesday night and we have a big show ahead of us tonight. We have Tracy Barrett Adams with us tonight. And my big question for her is, can hypnosis get you pregnant? Well, we're going to talk about that coming up in just a minute as we look at fertility foundations with hypnosis. Tracy is a clinical hypnotherapist based in Seattle. She is the creator of the internationally taught hypnomothering program for fertility, childbirth, and beyond, and the Clear Sleep Protocol. Uh, and Tracy's just fabulous. I've known her for a lot of years, and everything she puts out is just incredible. She's an instructor for both IMDHA and ICBCH. She also co-teaches integrative medical hypnosis, a comprehensive 12-week certification program developed with Roger Moore, training practitioners in advanced applications of hypnosis for health and wellness. And if I'm not mistaken, Tracy, you have a training that's about to start soon, right? Still
Uh,
openings in it?
we have an opening
Okay,
September.
well,
We start September
this is
15th.
not Tracy's audition for you to, sell yourself into her program, but and we
We
don't
do.
need
We
to
have
mention
we
that ahead of
have
time.
not we have not quite we have we're not quite oversold, but we have one opening left. So
I do want you to know that what we're talking about tonight is fertility foundations. We can talk about hypnobirthing, we can talk about all of that stuff, and of course, be part of uh, the event here with us. Before we get into any of that, though, Tracy, let me know, if you will, how you found your way to hypnosis in the first place.
to hypnosis. Well,
Yeah.
I found my way to hypnosis on a back route when I was a little kid. I had a problem with dental work thanks to a bad egg dentist in a little tiny town where I grew up, and I wouldn't go to the dentist. I refused as a child, and my mother, who was a very resourceful person, found me in another town. It was an hour and a half commute, a dentist who did hypnosis. And I believe he had Dave Ellman's book on hypnosis in his bookshelf. And he did hypnosis, and I had all my dental work done under hypnosis. And then when I was a person at a turning point in my life, I met a hypnotist and said, "Oh, that's what I'm going to do." I was looking at going to sonography school. I was absolutely like on the edge of signing up for it. I'd gone and visited and everything. And I went, "No, a hypnotherapist." And that's how I did that because I knew it worked for me. I had years of dental work with fillings and drillings and all kinds of things, all under hypnosis. So
And yet you decided to specialize in fertility instead of hypnodental work.
true. This is true. Well, the thing about my dentist doing hypnodental work is he was a dentist. I wasn't a dentist. So
There you
and people I don't think were actively looking for that kind of work. I think they were looking for the pain relief that experience established for me was possible. And I think they're looking for help with their phobias around dental work, which is certainly possible, certainly worked for me as well. But I initially went into hypnotherapy as wanting to specialize in working with end of life. That was my thought. But thankfully, right away, I learned a few things about that. I don't discount it. It's very helpful for end of life or people and families going through different parts of that journey. However, the palliative care doctor who lived across the street from me right when I got my certification said, I don't know that there's a really good paying market for this because it is so true that we have really good medications and we just don't worry about over medicating people. And so I put that on the back burner in terms of starting my practice and went into birth, which is kind of the other end
I
of
was going to
that
say
journey.
180
Yeah.
degrees.
So I went into birth and I was working in the demographic with people with hypnosis for childbirth and teaching classes. And that's the way I found my way into working with fertility because that same demographic that was having children also has friends who are struggling to have children or people who had a child and then were having secondary infertility. And that's how those referrals started coming in. And initially, I really thought maybe I was getting out of my lane to work with that because I myself had not struggled with fertility at all. However, I got over that after a few clients because, as we know, we don't have to have the thing that the person in front of us has had and dealt with. The sensitivity level, though, that people who struggle with fertility have around not being understood by those who haven't struggled with it is real. So that's something we have to take into consideration in that work. But um,
So there's a little bit more to it than just saying, "Oh, honey, relax."
yeah, we got to avoid that. And every single person I've worked with has heard that, has heard, "Well, just go on vacation, just stop trying, just, just, yeah, or my friend saw this doctor, or my friend took this tea, and I heard that if you give up sugar, then you'll get pregnant, or I've heard if you do one thing or another." And this is an area where people feel strangely comfortable getting up in your business to give you advice or to ask questions about your sex life or what kind of medications you might be taking or why you don't have a child yet, why you don't have a baby yet. And also at the same time, there's a felt sense among these clients often of people being so curious, but then really not gaining an understanding and not feeling the empathy that they wish they could feel from people that's understanding the stress around loss or around trying or all the different facets of this. There's a lot of, just like we have a monthly cycle, that monthly cycle becomes stressful every month, and losses and complex grief, that sometimes people also say, well, you'll just get over that. Well, at least you can get pregnant, right? If somebody's had a miscarriage, well, at least you can get pregnant. There's a lot of those at least kind of statements that are thrown around. And so people who are working on fertility often get real quiet and don't talk about it to their community, to their family. Sometimes it affects couples as well. And so it can be a really lonely place. And so as hypnotherapists, as for me, that was a big learning curve, or it wasn't maybe that tall a learning curve, but certainly an awareness to develop that when these clients come in, a huge component of that is really listening, hearing what they're going through, what they're dealing with, and being a real active listener, but not an advice giver on that.
Ironically, you have to get all up in that business, do you not? I mean, you have to hear a lot about that.
You do have to hear a lot about it. And I will say that, unlike childbirth, where interestingly, is that so much of it is education. So much of it is letting people know this is how your uterus works and this is what's happening. And in class after class of teaching that, people be, wow, I didn't know that. And if somebody's been struggling with fertility and they come into your office, they know all the things. There is nothing the most likely very little kind of physiology that we're going to be teaching them that's going to be any news to them. So it's interesting that people, though, like you said, getting up in their business, if I know what the person's coming in for and what they want, that is the business that we're dealing with. So in other words, someone who's been trying to naturally conceive and they're making a decision about whether they're going to branch into doing in vitro fertilization. That decision point is letting go of one version of anxiety and trying and embarking in a whole other path of potentially anxious trying. And so the role is hearing how they feel about it and what they hope for. And that's the question I ask is, what are you hoping for from this process? And usually, just like people might naturally do, they will share, this is the hard journey I've had so far, but I don't cut them off. I do let them talk about that more than I might about some issues where we might get a little caught in the quagmire. One of the hardest things for people struggling with fertility is being heard and listened to, even by their doctors. So I do
Well, you
hear all that.
opened my mind already to nuances and possibilities that I hadn't thought of before. Or, I mean, it's not my specialty, but the nuance of, yes, I want to get pregnant, but the nuance of what's going on, what else have you tried, any of those things, and listening and now I'm at a point that I have to decide whether to keep trying to do it this way or trying to do it another way. Help me do that. That's a nuance that I hadn't even really considered that might be a part of this process. That's very interesting.
And another part of that process is sometimes deciding to stop trying. And that is its own journey. And the question of can hypnosis get you pregnant? I've had a number of clients absolutely say, yes, hypnosis has got me pregnant. And, we'll shout that to the moon. But I'll tell you what, this is one area like maybe unlike any others that I would not say a certain percentage of my clients get pregnant, or this is worked. I wouldn't tell them those success stories. When I'm working with somebody on insomnia, I'll say, well, some people have this experience and this experience, and most everyone experiences benefit. And with fertility, the stakes are so high at the point where somebody's seeing a hypnotherapist, usually, that any measure of softening the potential benefit, or overblowing it, making a false promise. I just stay away from that. So these people will say, what if it doesn't work? And I'll say, well, let's talk about what working means. Where can you, and we'll explore the bigger picture. Really, Michael gave half my talk, I think, because that's really a lot of what we are looking at. We get so focused when we've been trying to have a baby. It's all on the head of this pin of it working or not working. And Michael's story reminded me of the way my mother used to drive a car. And I grew up in the California mountains. And my mother was from the Midwest. She was from Chicago, and she would drive along those mountain roads like this with her hands gripping the wheel, their own white knuckles, and she'd say, "What if I drive off the edge? Don't let me drive off the edge. What if I drive off the edge?" And when
Click, click,
that,
click.
the right, and the emotional state of what if I drive out? She's seeing herself driving off the edge. She's visualizing it. And my father, who did not drive, I remember my father being in the passenger side on the mountainside going, hey, hey. He was, almost taking the wheel. And when I learned to drive, I was not taught by my mother. I was taught by my best friend's dad. And I remember being on that very road and him saying to his daughter, don't look over there at the edge. Look where you're going. Look where you're going. Keep your eyes on the road.
Mhm.
And that is something that, as a metaphor, when we're working on trying to get pregnant, the potential bad outcome of driving off the cliff is so severe. It's a question of identity and a loss of what many people have planned for their whole life since the time they were children, is having children, being a parent, or they feel remorse because maybe they maybe missed some more potentially fertile years, or have maybe had an intentionally terminated pregnancy that then they feel that they shouldn't have done. So there's all sorts of potential grief and anxiety in there, and not getting stuck in that, but putting the focus on let's see what we're creating and that bigger picture of themselves as a person. And that's why I like Michael's metaphor so much, is that it really can be about finding quarters. Like, where do you put your focus on where's the light in this tunnel? What can be wonderful here? And knowing that when you look for the light in the tunnel, you will find it. Absolutely.
You know, you're making, pardon me for interrupting. I thought you were finishing your sentence there. With what you're making me really aware of something that kind of surprised me. And Karen sort of said this earlier. I'm just getting it in triplicate now. Is that I expected, and forgive me for having expectations about you, Tracy, but what I expected was that what we're going to hear is a whole bunch of things about how to use hypnosis to get pregnant. And what I'm really clear about is it isn't just about getting pregnant, it's about working with people around all of the issues surrounding fertility. And there may be, as you said, there may be some people that are never going to get pregnant for whatever reason. And now the question is, how do we help them work through that and do that kind of work? So it's so much more than I had was thinking about coming in. So
Oh, great. Well, it is the starting place. The starting place is, to me, and these are not techniques for getting pregnant. These are techniques for having, I think, a kind of a good life, but they also directly affect pregnancy. And the reason people are trying to get pregnant is for their good life. That's what they are. That's part of it. But reducing physical stress, however we do it, anchoring stress reduction, is a technique that I would use that's going to benefit that person, whatever their journey, wherever they are in their journey. And it really does. I think it's important to explain, though, to the person who's trying to get pregnant why we're doing all these things, because they are not, we're not educating them about their body necessarily, but educating them about why it's valuable to do these things, and because it is Michael, your example of this relation of yours who would kind of put blinders on looking for the negatives. The person who's been trying to get pregnant and has felt more, and as each month goes by, or perhaps they've experienced a devastating loss, just and I have heard some heartbreaking stories. This all just creates this kind of chronic stress in the body. And plus, people may be doing hormone injections. They may be doing all different sorts of things that are physically, literally stressing the body from the outside in. And so just dialing down the nervous system into a restful state and getting really good at that and helping the client learn to do that. As I'm doing this and explaining why this is valuable, I might be talking about some of the physiology, not to explain the physiology, but to say, like, even I might name some of those body parts, like say this is helping that, reproductive axis to be more balanced and for the system to be more functional and reciprocal. I might use some words like that as we're, give some suggestion like that, just as they're learning some kind of an anchored stress response or stress reduction technique that they can use. And another technique, it's not exactly a technique, but we talked about this just briefly a moment ago, but expanding the possibility of hope. One of the things that happens by the time people get to the hypnotherapist usually is that they have started being realistic, right? I got to be realistic about whether this is going to work. I might be that's a positive pregnancy test, but I'm not going to say anything about it or think about it or have any connection to this until I know, till they get past the 12-week mark, or I'm going to do an IVF transfer and I'm not going to have the test for 2 weeks. And I'm just going to refuse to even think about this in that amount of time. And that is one of the things that I work with people, if they're willing to, not everybody is, but to look at the other side of realism is just as good as this negative side. The other side that, yes, this may be a possibility. And if this is a possibility, what might that feel like? One of the most beautiful stories that I have, it still makes me cry. It's only 10 years, the kid's 10 years old now, but it still makes me cry. I had a client who had done multiple rounds of IVF. Multiple. She had a lot of frozen little embryos, and she did all of as many people do when overseas, to do her IVF, all of her retrievals and transfers. And they were heading overseas to do one last one. And I think she'd done, double digits. She had done a lot of these. And we were going to do one last one. And she came to the hypnotherapist because she was really okay, we're about done. We're wrapping this up. We're not doing this again. This is it. We're going to go do this one, but that's it. And her whole body was like in a little pretzel. Her whole body language was all closed, and her legs were crossed, and her ankles were crossed, and her arms were crossed. And I talked to her how she felt about that embryo, and she goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, like, you're going to carry that embryo. It's going to be transferred to you. What if you gave yourself a chance? What would it be like if you gave yourself a chance to really just let yourself connect with that embryo for however long you carry it, whether you're going to carry that for 2 days or 2 weeks or 9 months?" And she just went, huh. And her first response was to say no, but then she said yes. And we did some hypnosis around that. And that was where the change work was she wanted to say yes to that. She said, I would like to do that. I would like to do that. And we did some work around how she identified as a mother and what it would be like to love that baby while it was inside her for however long it was, and to look at it as a baby and not just a cluster of cells, which we don't have to get into the science of that as much as to say for her that was valuable to think of it this way. For a little while, and she was really willing to do that. And I made her a little recording that because basically they do the transfer and then they get on a plane. They go get on a plane. It's like that quick. And when they do these overseas, and I gave her a little recording to listen to. And but before she left the office to go, they were going to go get on the plane the next day. She said, after that change work and after the considering opening that possibility to loving that baby, she said, I just feel completely different about everything. I feel set free. And I did not do that. That was her that said yes to that process, but it allowed her to hope. And then she did. That baby stuck. That baby is a 10-year-old kid now. And that she's one who said, oh yeah, hypnosis got me pregnant. And we'd worked together though for weeks on that long-term stress reduction and her having relaxation anchors and her moving through her negative thinking, kind of reframing her negative thinking in some other ways as well. So just saying, this is somebody who, sometimes that's a seems like such a simple thing, but it took a little path to get there. And on the other thought I have to, oh, go ahead. Were you going to say
Oh,
something, Michael?
please. Oh, please go ahead.
Oh, well, I just kind of going through the core things that I think of that aren't universal because nobody's the same, but these are things that I always have in mind going into working with fertility that will be probably doing some stress, emotional, mental, physical stress reduction, and some opening up. What does hope look like for you? What would it look like to be hopeful and let that be realistic? And then expanding possibilities beyond that baby into your whole life being just like you being a whole person with or without that baby. And that lowers the stakes and I never use the word lower the stakes with them. I use the word lower the stakes. If you don't know, so I use that phrase with sleep when I talk about hypnosis for sleep, but I don't talk about it with fertility. But it does kind of lower the pressure, I would say, overall in a person's life. And so I will have people work on magnifying their perception of laughter, kind of look like just like Michael was talking about, like really looking for where are those glimmers of things that you love? Where are those glimmers of things that you already know that remind you of who you are right now? Where are those things that strike a true chord for you? And people will sometimes they will start listening to music again, or they'll start um, connecting in different ways with their partner that feel good and that are, talking about other things. And this sometimes means like there's an app that you can check on your when people are trying to conceive naturally, you can check your hormone levels every single day, almost every single minute of the day. And there's an app, and I understand why people want to do that. It becomes a real compelling addiction. And it's not very helpful to getting pregnant. It just helps you know what's happening in the moment. And so sometimes expanding possibilities, just like you would say to anybody who is scrolling all the time, what if you give yourself a little freedom from that in the course of the day? What might you do? So, you know.
So it sounds to me that you're pulling a lot of this stuff out of thin air, depending on what the client presents and what their BS is, what their belief system is, because
Mhm.
you can't go in with a script or a book and say, here, this is for you, because they're going to go, yeah, 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 I'm not dealing with that. This is my issue. Or,
Exactly.
no, we're at this level. We're not at the conception level anymore. We're now at are we going to get IVF or, right?
Hmm.
So all of that is really freestyle working with the client.
Yes.
How in the world do you teach that? Are you teaching a few techniques to have
Oh,
them?
what a good question, Karen. That was a stumper for me for a long time. I refused to teach it for a long time because it's just like uh, it's just as simple and as complicated as hearing what's going on and responding to it. And so, nevertheless, what really persuaded me to do it was that I have a program that's pretty popular, and I have a lot of Australian practitioners, interestingly, in a program called Hypno Mothering, which is for postpartum. And it was originally designed as just for postpartum women. And so a lot of practitioners who teach different versions of hypnobirthing and hypnosis for childbirth took that class. And it's a group class. And so these are practitioners who are teaching some version of hypnobirthing and they're teaching our class, and they're also having the same experience that I had as a practitioner in that area of having that demographic say, hey, what about fertility? Could you work with me on this? And so some of those practitioners are not actually, they don't really practice hypnotherapy other than those group classes. And so I started thinking, well, what if I made something that they could do as a group, and how would I approach that? And that really set me free in teaching this to say, what are the most common threads that that everyone is really dealing with, and wouldn't apply necessarily rigidly as scripts to a hypnotherapy session, but the group kind of format really set me free to talk about not only doing this thing in a group, which I did run one group with my existing fertility clients just to see how they liked it, and they did like it, but it also was freeing to say, this session is devoted to this kind of thing, and you can adapt this now for that specific client. And then still going with those core ideas of teaching the body and mind to relax down together, so that we're not literally being creating a hostile environment in the body, and for whatever version of conception we're looking at, and releasing the cumulative effects of the stress that's associated with it. Everybody's dealing with that. The fact that one person may be dealing with grief or dealing with a decision or both, they're still going to benefit from becoming more fully themselves and feeling more connected to the world as a whole beyond just this baby. And so that's how I got into teaching it. And then within that context and framework, teaching it more, teaching it overall through case studies, like talking about when working with this person, this is what we did. But it's an advanced course, so we talk about, just like we may decide in any situation, to this session, I'm going to do parts therapy. This session, we're going to do this. But there are some suggestions as well that apply to natural conception, that apply to people who have PCOS, that apply to people who have going through the stimulation and retrieval and transfer process of IVF. There are some really good hypnotic suggestions that I find that people really benefit from. Usually I make them a recording, and that's also part of what I teach too, is what are those really, if we're talking to the body about this specific thing, what kinds of messages do we want the body to receive?
Mm.
Still in the context of the individual, right. So if the person is giving us their own metaphors, or they're giving us their own resolution through a parts therapy session, we incorporate that in that little recording that I would make. So,
Tracy, we're learning something really useful here at the virtual chapter. In that last month, I think it was last month, if I remember, neurodivergence. Is that right? That was last month, and and it was the same
It's
thing.
hard to remember.
Is that I think I came to the discussion looking for something about here's what you do with people who have this thing, which is sort of funny because it's the opposite of what I teach my students all the time. But nonetheless, I'm like drawn to this talk because I'm like, oh, good. Then if I ever get somebody who's neurodivergent, I'll know what to do with them. But what I discovered, and Karen commented on it as well afterwards, we had an interesting little talk about it, is that it seems on the one hand, we're going to talk about the other hand in a minute because that's your specialty. But on the one hand, it seems as though everybody's got the same shit going on, no, no matter what title it's under. So because I can imagine, again, obviously it's just my imagination. I have never been pregnant or trying to be in my life, but I wonder if that was an issue that I was struggling with. It would take me all kinds of places to what does this mean about me and who am I and what's my value in the world and and all of that stuff. So we're dealing with the kind of self-esteem issues that we might deal with any other client. That just happens to be the thing that showed up that's in the way of fertility.
right.
And
Yeah.
then there is what you said at the beginning also that I so applaud you for is that we don't want to rush in and assume that we know what to say and what's going on with people, particularly if they're having experiences that we have never had ourselves. And so the need for rapport and compassionate interaction and all of that stuff is the one thing I think we need to teach everybody twice as much. you
And
know
yes, and even if we have had that experience, even for practitioners who struggle with their fertility, I think because everyone's experience is so different,
yeah.
that capacity and to be flexible as we're listening to adapt whatever we're doing for what is going on with that person, and for some people, in terms of techniques, I, a little swish is great for resolving sometimes a sort of a negative outlook on things. And for some people, we're going to be doing deeper work and, or more what might feel like more profound cosmic resolution in the
Yeah.
moment and whatever. But if it's helping them and it's working, it's all profound cosmic resolution, I think. That I think that the kind of tangle of really hard emotion that comes around this issue for most people is hard to distinguish identity from, it's hard to distinguish if I don't have this, then who am I? It's wrapped up in the way that shame is, in the way, because there's a lot of shame that's sometimes carried with this, or grief that feels like it becomes part of you, right? Rather than like, if I'm trying to not have this migraine, I just want to get rid of this migraine. But if I'm a person who has been struggling with this, trying to get pregnant, that that shame of there being something wrong with my body, that I'm failing my partner, and I'm failing my marriage, and I'm failing my life's dream. That and a lot of times people who come in do have anxiety issues, and so they're wrapped up with that. So in terms of listening and what we're listening for, like, hearing that, and also really hearing the person who's super positive and comes in and says, I just know that I'm going to get pregnant, I'm going to have a baby, and that's going to be great. And I also love my life, and I work out at the gym, and I sleep great. And there are people like this who take care of themselves, and they also want to do every other thing to help themselves. They have um, a healthy and vibrant lifestyle, and they are doing things for themselves. That same person might be doing acupuncture or some other strategies to help also encourage their nervous system uh, towards fertility and conception.
Mm.
And those clients are lovely to work with. And it is important for us not to put the burden of some of the people who are in more pain on them too, to just really let them thrive with that as well. And so, yeah, seeing people as an individual, working with them, and all the techniques that we would use for any other thing are all available here, is listening for what's going to be helpful. As a practitioner, I think the hardest thing is knowing that how to balance that grief and negativity without coming off like a cheerleader, without coming off like when pushing the platitudes out the side of my mind, even though sometimes they might come to mind, I'm not going to say them. So that is the space that we're making for those sessions to develop and evolve.
That's
You
the
said,
artistry of what we do.
Pardon?
The artistry of what we do.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
you
I'm
said
sorry.
something earlier about what does it mean about me, and and all that stuff, and there's one sense in which I'm sure that somebody trying to get pregnant um, might have this loss of self-worth, but at the same time, it seems like um, they're not only the or what am I doing wrong? I think Tracy was what I heard you say. That's what got me. They're not only the one who is at fault here, and I say that obviously with quotes. I don't mean it. They're not the one who is not only the one who's at fault here, but there's another way for them to see it, is that they're the one that is the victim here, because this seems to be happening to them.
Yeah.
Because if they're not connected with their physical self, with their
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a really good point. A lot of clients, this isn't universal, but a lot of the physical disconnect, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that
oh please.
disconnection, it's so often when I talk to, when we ask clients, well, where do you feel that anxiousness in your body? I don't know. It's in my head. Much more so with higher percentage of those fertility clients really have shut off a somatic connection with their body. And so, in terms of a thing that comes up really commonly, it is developing that and enjoying that and tuning into it. Everything from their sensuality feels like it's kind of dry and, you know, joyless because it's scheduled or it's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And
this again in quotes failure is something that their body is doing to them.
right. There's
So,
a part of what we do is connect up to the body again, like learn to love the body, learn to forgive the body, learn to talk to the body,
yeah.
and to not just do those mechanical things that are taking care of the body, which they're all doing, avoiding toxins and eating well and all of this kind of thing, but to have some compassion and develop trust in the body that the body is working hard and to really use the power of visualization to connect with the body. One of the things that I will do with almost every client that I'm working with is in the first, before we do anything, because people are there, where's the hypnosis? I'll say, uh, let's do a little focus exercise. And then we'll talk about what we're doing next. And I'll have people just do a little bit, a little self-regulating breathing and um, cueing some relaxation in the feet, give them a little felt sense of that. And I'll have them start to pretend, just, like we all do, just start to pretend that their hands are heavy. And I'll just say, I don't say, you don't have to feel they're heavy, but just pretend that they are. And now, are you pretending that they're really heavy? And I'll say, well, how are you pretending that? I'll ask them, I'll see if I can get them to engage imaginatively. Well, I'm imagining they're really big, or they're imagining they're really, made of concrete or something. It's like, oh, great. I said, well, you're pretending that really well, and your unconscious mind doesn't distinguish what's literally happening from what you pretend. So it's already sending some increased blood supply down there. So you're probably going to be feeling some warmth in your hands. And they'll go, yeah, I am. And that, in terms of getting to know what they're thinking, is going to help them with all the other elements of conceiving is a really, it's not, it's, I wouldn't say it's across the board, but that is a first step into then understanding the value, not only of how what they might visualize might be helpful, but how they feel about their body, communicate to their body, and can make friends with their body again. Yes.
And boy, Tracy, does this roll over into couples work too?
Mm-hmm.
Because, sometimes there's blame. It must be his fault, or, oh, it's got to be my fault, and he must hate me for this. I could lose the relationship over this, all of that kind of thing. And the problems I may be having at home, does it roll over into doing some couples
Oh
work?
yeah, it does. I would say, well, two counts. Sometimes there's a male infertility factor, and that's where we're working on that level. But I do that. That's usually not as couple but that was more working with men. But working with couples is great. We do some. In my practice, I haven't worked with a lot of couples. Maybe a couple handfuls of them, but it's always been but a little bit of moving through what our roles are in that and really it's about just uniting in my experience overall, really coming together to connect about and to connect in a common vision and a common support and moving through. If there's been some resentment, it's usually not about what's either of the people is actually doing. It's about sort of self-directed distress that's maybe leaking out. And yeah, it's really helpful. And doing self-hypnosis together as well as part of that, I've found to be also giving them something to do together, whether that's um, doing some sort of scripted work that they're working on together, or listen to a recording, or just literally sitting and setting a little bit of an intention together and doing some breath work together. And so that they're both sitting there doing some self hypnosis on the same intention for 5 minutes. Um, it's coming together. So,
so Tracy, working with couples is I mean, this is lovely. I like hearing this, and of course, I know that you do obviously a lot of consulting with women.
mhm.
Do you work with men that show up and say, I've got this issue, I'm not fertile
I
or
don't get a lot of call for that. I'll tell you. I'm not saying those guys aren't out there that would want to do this work, but I have not gotten a lot of call for it. I really only seen a couple of guys for this, and it's always been in the context of, well, the partner saying, who has been working on hypnosis with me and then just thinks it'd be a good idea for him to do it. But usually with male infertility factor, right now, at this point, in the way that things are right now, with the science, with the medicine, is that providers know providers know this right away, usually if there's something going on, and will be offering medical solutions for that, medical assistance. So sometimes that's in the form of IUI, where they kind of gather up the sperm and the good sperm, and they have a look at it and they transfer it, or they go straight to IVF, and so or they go to donor sperm. So it's really less medically, I think perceived as less clinically valuable. If he's stressed, it does create a problem. It could affect it, but it's not. Once they determine that he's got a low sperm count or low motility or something, then usually clinically they move right along. So maybe moving over the emotional burden of it. Working with couples, I would see that more, especially, again, moving into the decision. One of the places where I also work with couples or have worked with them is going to that decision point of where we've tried naturally, and we've done all the things we were going to do before we go to IVF, and now we want to go into that united and strong and feeling good. And
So, if you don't mind, a question from the room, Falashita has asked, what are some of the hypnotic suggestions that you found to be very profound in your line of work with fertility? What are some of the ones that you find are very useful?
Depending on whatever is going on with the person, I would speak directly to what's happening in the body. And I'll usually ask them, if you could tell, like, let's say with natural conception, if you could tell your body what to do right now, and that maybe they know that their body's not doing it right, or maybe they don't know, they just hope. I'll say, what would that be? And I'll incorporate those words into what we're doing. So they might say, when I'm ovulating, I want the eggs to be perfectly formed and plump, and we'll start talking about that, and then I will incorporate that into the wording of the session. But doing research, I think it's valuable to do a little bit of research on whatever specific thing they're dealing with. So if they're going through IVF, there's a period of time where we're suppressing ovulation so that we get a lot of our eggs to harvest later. We do a little bit of suppression. And during that suppression time, I'll usually suggest that this is kind of like winter, and everything's covered with snow, and everything's going to be resting and nourishing. I like those kinds of suggestions, but I also will throw in some suggestions about, and your eggs are having a good rest and they're developing in there perfectly. So literally speaking to that. And in my experience, people who are trying to get pregnant really appreciate, the metaphors, but they also really appreciate knowing that, especially because they've had those convincers, right? We've done some, I wouldn't say convincers, but some phenomena like a warm hands or something where they know what they're thinking is affecting their body. When I say, and now imagine light surrounding those beautiful ovaries, and each one is doing exactly what it should be, and according to what the words that they might have used to describe that. Those kinds of suggestions I find helpful in addition to metaphor. And I also think that when we look at what those suggestions are going to be, I do give them some opportunity, as we kind of talk things over. Usually I do find that things like healing light or loving light going through the body, I'm almost always incorporate in these sessions because, again, speaking to connecting with the body in a positive way. Light, I think, represents a positive for the unconscious mind. So just sending light that's going around intuitively with your highest intelligence, finding all of those places that need to be, where there's something to resolve, and just taking care of that. Surrounding the uterus with love. What color is that? Kind of talking to them about that. I had one client. This is only one client that this was. When we talk about the sperm meeting the egg, and that connection happening. Well, the suggestion that I'll almost always give is that that's a connection of love, right? They're connecting with their partner that they love, and they want that to be a loving connection, and that this is for natural conception. And so, kind of getting to know them either as a couple or just individually, like what has meaning to you. And I had a client who loved, she and her husband loved to dance. So they imagined that little sperm, that little guy dancing up the fallopian tube, and then dancing, finding, and looking for just the right partner to dance with, and then dancing with that, and we would know that is, knowing enough about the physiology to know what we want to be happening, and then finding the right path for that client.
And that's the important thing, at least from my standpoint, is that's the expertise, Tracy, that a fertility hypnotherapist brings to the work, right? Because as you said, in one sense, the issues are all quite similar in many senses, except they're similar, and while at the same time they're contained in this one, what do I want to say, content area or something, where you have to know something about how it works in order to be able to create the connection within that you want to. When ignorance. I don't even know how to spell fallopian, so I'm not going to get anywhere
Right.
near this.
Well, okay, but I hear you, and I think 15 years ago, it was a little bit different. Learning to do working with fertility, I think the thing I would say point up as a really important point that you brought up is more so than when somebody comes in with IBS. With fertility, we want to know what the physiology of whatever they're dealing with. So through that phone consult, we learn a little bit about that. I do have a lot of that in my head, but if I didn't, I would Google that so that I had the vocabulary, so that I don't want to make that client explain to me what should be happening, because they have too much explaining to do all the time. And they do want to know that you're coming in with this issue more than with IBS or with migraines or, a post-operative knee. They want to know that you know what they're dealing with,
Absolutely.
at least on the mechanical kind of technical side. And, I had to learn a lot of that stuff. And, you still would want to, but you can learn. It doesn't take very long at this point to get enough information so that you can ask good questions using the right words
Yeah.
to ask those
Well, and if
questions.
you're going to promote yourself as a fertility specialist,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they come to you and see that you don't know nearly as much about the topic as they do,
Right.
this is problematic. So
Right.
that's the thing that you bring to the work is congruity
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
because you do your homework. Yeah.
Yeah. The homework here is, I think, really important. And uh, balancing that with what we said before, with we can do all the homework, but then listening, well, what's really happening with this client, right? We've done the homework on what we think. I had a client who was about to embark on not IVF, but just taking some hormones to try to stimulate the chances for conception. And um, her goal was just to improve her mood. That was what she said. She said, I just feel so sad and so unhappy all the time because I thought this was going to be easy, and
Mhm.
now I have to take a medication. And she, you know, she said, yeah, I'm just so mad at my husband all the time. I don't know why I'm mad at him. And and that's, I would have thought she would have wanted, well, some suggestions about her egg and the sperm meeting. And, we did do some of that, but she needed to resolve this anger that had been brewing from the first, period that she got, that she didn't, and her husband working on the house all the time instead, is busy doing a lot of things and seems so happy. And she's not. It's like, in her mind, in terms of mood, it's like if you're trying to sleep and your partner is snoring, she's trying to have a baby and he's fixing the roof. And so, knowing what the person is hoping for, again, means that the research that you've done actually has a practical application for them, rather than the research that we're doing, guiding the process.
So I'm guessing there are not a lot of one-offs in your in your business? People just coming in, they have one session and they're cured and they go away.
That's an interesting question. Yes, you're right. Hardly any one-offs, but it's also like we don't say, okay, well, you're going to be pregnant by the time we're done. 3 sessions, there we go.
There's
You
my
know,
question precisely. So how do you decide about how long it's going to take? How many sessions to come up with?
I
What?
yeah, it's a great question. Well, that's where I do a phone consult with every client. There isn't a client that I book that I haven't done a phone consult with. So I talked with them and I learn a little bit. It's about a half an hour, 25 minutes scheduled consult, and I find out a little bit about their history and what they want and what they hope for. And then I talk about, then we set some expectations. Maybe if the person who just wants to feel better because they're switching from one mode to another, then I can say, well, let's schedule a couple of sessions. If you want more than that, then fine, we can do that. But this is a process. If somebody's, I just saw a client this week who had a later on the later side miscarriage, not all the way late, but like a 14-week miscarriage, which is later. And she, um, it was very traumatic. And then she had, I mean, traumatic, and she has a medical phobia now. She feels really triggered by being in her doctor's office, and then now she has to go do another IVF transfer. Um, and we scheduled 4 sessions just to get to the place where she could have that transfer. Um, so in those two cases, they kind of had different goals, different timelines than they were on. And I usually will say, if a person just says, I am, I'm starting IVF and I want to optimize my chances, I'll say, well, let's schedule 3 sessions, and then maybe a session right before your uh, uh, egg retrieval, and a session before your transfer, and then maybe a session after your transfer. So it might look like that, if the person needs it or wants it. It really is variable. There isn't a set timing. I have had one person who came to see me who saw me regularly for quite a little while. She just said this is rare, for us as hypnotherapists for that to happen, but she just said she liked how completely relaxed she felt talking things over and then going into hypnosis and feeling like she just kind of could jettison her whole week every time she did that and then start fresh. And that was so we saw each other for quite a little while. So that's unusual, but so yes, rarely a one-off. Um, but no, not necessarily a lot, not necessarily, months, because we're not looking to get pregnant during the work. We're looking to help the person move into a space where they're ready to get pregnant, where they're ready, where they have a sense of presence in their body, a sense of hope, a sense of being able to encourage their body. They might go off with some recordings that I've made them too.
But you're also working on very specific outcomes.
Right. Well, yes. The outcome, ultimately, the big picture is they want to have a baby in their arms. So,
Right.
but
But it
this,
also might be relaxing into the shots that they have to take every day. Or it might,
yeah, some people have to get over a needle phobia.
right,
Some
right,
people,
right, right.
some people have to, some people need to change their diet to a PCS friendly diet, and they just have struggle with that. Sometimes people's doctors have said you have to get your BMI down, and so it's not just like somebody's doctor saying get your BMI down. It's get your BMI down so you can do this most important thing in your life, right? It's and said often by the doctor with a little bit of contempt. So sometimes the person might say, well, I need to stick to this diet, but they're really dealing with the big picture of their conception. Nowadays, I see more people who have been on Ozempic to reduce their BMI or their body fat content, and then they're going to go off of that to try to get pregnant, and they're anxious about managing what will happen after they go off of that. So it's a lot in that container of fertility. It's not a straightforward thing, but this is one of the reasons why it's so fabulous to work with, because it is so interesting and it's so varied, and it is the most beautiful thing when people send you the pictures of their babies. When you get those baby pictures and people are giving you little progress reports along their pregnancy, there's no thrill as a practitioner that I have that compares to that.
I love the metaphor that there's a lot in that container of fertility. It occurs to me we're sort of running, we're almost out of time here, and it's there's just so much wonderful stuff that you've shared with us already. I'm just curious. It seems that if there is one other tangential thing, the container that sits next to that one on the shelf, perhaps, is hypnobirthing. Is there a
hmm
relationship? Do you do hypnobirthing yourself, or do people combine those two?
Yeah, oh yeah, well, every client that I do fertility with who is having a baby, we do hypnosis for childbirth together. I used to teach classes with couples for years where I would start. My colleague Kira Dorian and I had Seattle hypnobirthing for many years in Seattle, and teaching. We had we had classroom that held 8 couples, and we would start a new class of 6 sessions every few weeks. So we had Saturday morning classes and a Wednesday night and a Monday night class, and so we had a lot running concurrently. And I would always slip those fertility clients. They would get a free pass to the childbirth class.
Ah,
So yeah, interestingly, some of the self-regulation tools and dialing down into the calm nervous system are really completely across the board. So, they just translate. So yes.
I can imagine that a client might stay with you for an extended period of time to get pregnant, to have the baby, and then may even come back for additional issues after that. That could be quite a long.
I have had that happen. I have had that happen a number of times, and then sometimes Michael asked about if I work with men a lot. Well, here's what I work with men. I work with men on erectile dysfunction a fair amount, and I work with men of those sometimes of the people who go through the hypnosis for childbirth course the or sometimes the fertility process, especially if we work together. Sometimes men will come back in for some anxiety or some something that is maybe not directly related to all of that, but is that they're there because that maybe wouldn't have occurred to them to come to hypnotherapy, and then except for the experience that we've had on
well
working on
then,
other things.
and then after you're done with this, of course, what you're left with is a clientele that is now raising children.
Well, funny you should mention that, Michael Watson, but I have a class called Gentle Menopause that I have a new course that I have developed that is so great. I mean, I shouldn't be bragging about it. I mean, I say
Yeah.
it's so great because I have so much fun teaching it. It is really a fun class. I'm not boasting about its greatness. I don't know. I don't make any real claims about that, but I do really love that it has turned out to be like the next natural step after working with fertility and childbirth and postpartum. So
Do
it
you get
is,
men? Do you get men in your menopause class?
I haven't gotten any. I
No, but
did.
they are the cause of it.
Yeah.
That's why they
I
call it, that's why they call it menopause.
yeah, I
That's
have a
exactly right.
practitioner course. I have a practitioner course that's every Sunday morning in November, or the first 4 Sunday mornings in November. And I just got done over the summer teaching, I don't know, I was teaching or leading a 12-week sort of consumer facing, client facing course in menopause, or program in menopause, that I just kind of thought, well, I'll just run this up the flagpole. And I could not believe the response that I got from people. I did not realize that there was such a need. I just sent a little mailing out to all my clients and just was really so happy that it got a great response. So,
Well, Tracy, I got to tell you, as expected, you did not disappoint. There's something that I think is very apparent here. If what you want to do is follow a protocol and do the exact same thing every day so that you just have to show up and read a script, this ain't the job for you. Don't train in this. But if you want a really interesting career and you want to really be client-centered and work with where there's need, and you've got that empathy and you've got that compassion, man, I would say call Tracy Barrett Adams and do some training because what a great thing for the future. Especially in this country, as we're losing health care and we're losing support and we're losing all sorts of other things, this is going to be where it's at. This is the future in medicine. Because I know a lot of hospitals in Chicago are doing away with pediatrics entirely. So this is where you're going to have to get this kind of treatment. Tracy, I think it's wonderful. Tracy at Tracy Barrett Adams. It's Tracy, TracyBarrettAdams. I say that in case you didn't get the chat so that you can look it up. And if you want to follow up, that's how you get in touch with her. We don't have time for any more questions. I'm sorry. The only thing we have time for, and her integrative hypnosis class is coming up, by the way. There's one spot left. If you want to get in on that, contact her. By the way, she just tipped me off. If you'll say Karen, that's your coupon code, and you'll get a tuition reduction
By
for
the
that one.
way, there are all kinds of great topics for hypnotists to study, but they're great people to study with. And when it's somebody that has the expertise and experience as Tracy Barrett Adams, I would say look for her.
Yes.
If you're wanting
Thank you.
So this is what we do, our traditional thing. Everybody, please open up your mics and let's give Tracy the send-off she deserves. Love you. Thank you very much. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Next month, we're doing a
Appreciate you.
out regression with Connie Wedlowski. I'll have her name pronounce it correctly by next time. I promise you.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
This
Thank
is
you.
great.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.